You are 25 years old, staring at your biggest paycheck ever. The number feels like proof you're finally getting ahead. Your mind immediately starts building a brand new life. A newer car suddenly feels completely within reach. A nicer apartment starts appearing in every online search. The future finally looks bigger than your current reality. But one choice hiding inside this paycheck changes everything. It quietly decides whether you're wealthy at 50 or working at 70. Most people walk straight into the trap without noticing it. And by the time they finally see it, it's already too late. Financial lesson: invest raises before spending them. Jake stood exactly where most people stand after a raise. He stared at bigger paychecks and imagined a bigger lifestyle. He believed earning more money automatically created lasting wealth. Each new opportunity looked like permission to spend more. The upgrades seemed small when viewed one decision at a time, but those decisions quietly shaped completely different futures ahead. One afternoon, he noticed a pattern most people ignored. The highest earners around him still worried about money. That realization sent him searching for a different path. Chapter 1: The Introduction. Jake arrived before sunrise, while most office lights stayed dark. He placed his coffee down and opened yesterday's unfinished tasks. The inbox filled quickly, but he kept moving steadily. Co-workers arrived later and rushed between meetings and deadlines. Jake watched managers discuss promotions near the conference room. He imagined what a bigger paycheck could eventually buy. The thought followed him through nearly every task completed. Another email announced new opportunities for employees performing well. Jake leaned back briefly and started calculating future upgrades. Jake left work that evening and met friends downtown. Ethan arrived smiling beside a brand new financed car. He tossed the keys upward and caught them repeatedly. Everyone gathered around while Ethan described every premium feature. Jake walked around slowly, studying the shiny new purchase. The monthly payment sounded manageable when Ethan explained it. Others started discussing what they would buy after raises. The conversation drifted toward bigger apartments and newer cars. Jake listened quietly while watching excitement spread across the group. That night, those ideas followed him all the way home. Jake unlocked his apartment door, carrying those conversations home. The new car stayed on his mind through dinner. He opened his laptop and searched newer vehicles online. Photos and reviews filled the screen late into night. Soon, apartments appeared beside cars on his comparison lists. He started estimating what future upgrades might realistically cost. Every option seemed possible if income continued increasing steadily. Then, an email announced a raise arriving next month. Jake immediately opened a notebook and started planning purchases. The page filled quickly, while the raise remained untouched. Chapter 2: The Problem. After the raise, Jake spent weeks browsing things he never needed. The raise arrived, and new spending plans suddenly felt justified. He upgraded subscriptions that once seemed completely unnecessary before. Small monthly payments started appearing across different parts of life. Each payment looked harmless when viewed completely by itself. Soon, his paycheck felt smaller, despite earning more than before. The extra income disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. Jake noticed less money remaining at month end. He opened his banking app and stared quietly. Something was changing, but he could not explain why. Jake remembered how quickly his last raise had disappeared. He promised himself this raise would be handled differently. Then, advertisements started following him across every screen. A larger apartment suddenly seemed completely reasonable. A newer car began occupying more of his thoughts. He started comparing upgrades during lunch breaks at work. Each option looked affordable when viewed one payment at a time. The future raise was already being spent inside his mind. Savings never appeared in any of those plans. Jake was unknowingly preparing for the same mistake again. Jake started noticing something strange around the office. Several co-workers earned far more than he did, yet they constantly talked about bills and payments. One co-worker delayed vacations despite earning a large salary. Another received bonuses, but still worried every month. The pattern appeared again and again wherever Jake looked. Higher income seemed helpful, but something else was missing. Jake began paying closer attention to people's financial habits. The answer was hiding behind decisions nobody discussed openly. A simple observation was about to change everything for Jake. Chapter 3. The Trigger. Jake arrived early and noticed someone reading quietly alone. The man sat calmly while others hurried across the park. Jake slowed down and glanced toward the stranger again. The stranger seemed completely unbothered by the busy morning. Jake checked his phone while passing near the bench. The man closed a tablet and looked toward Jake. A short conversation started beneath the shade of trees. Jake listened carefully while commuters rushed past nearby. That morning introduced an idea Jake had never considered. Mark folded the newspaper and pointed toward a quiet headline. Jake leaned closer and read the article without saying anything. The story described ordinary workers retiring years earlier than expected. Mark tapped the page twice and watched Jake reread paragraphs. A single chart showed money growing long after deposits stopped. Jake looked around the park and noticed details differently. Several commuters rushed past while checking phones and coffee cups. Mark asked one short question that stayed in Jake's mind. Jake stared toward the skyline and stopped talking completely. The morning breeze moved the newspaper as Jake reconsidered everything. Jake walked home slowly while replaying Mark's question repeatedly. The words followed him through traffic, elevators, and meetings. That evening, Jake opened his laptop and searched financial articles. Every answer seemed connected to habits, not extraordinary incomes. The next morning, Jake returned to the same park bench. Mark arrived, carrying coffee and another folded newspaper. Jake asked how much money Mark earned during his career. Mark smiled through silence and placed the coffee down. Then, Mark revealed he stopped working years earlier, voluntarily. Jake froze beside the bench as the conversation changed completely. Chapter 4. The Solution. Mark leaned back and watched Jake wait for answers. He said his office salary was never anything extraordinary. For years, he quietly bought investments before buying luxuries. Every raise arrived, but his lifestyle barely changed afterward. His co-workers upgraded everything while he kept purchasing assets. Those investments slowly grew while he continued showing up daily. Jake listened carefully and stopped glancing at his phone. Mark explained each investment worked even while he slept. Over time, those assets generated income without extra effort. Then, Mark said, investments alone never actually made him rich. Mark said most investors stop before reaching the important stage. He explained investing was only the first step forward. The real goal was building enough capital for opportunities. Over decades, his portfolio quietly expanded beyond expectations. Eventually, that capital opened doors ordinary savings never could. Mark showed Jake ownership papers from several small businesses. The documents produced income without requiring daily involvement. Next, he displayed multiple passive income streams working together. Jake finally saw money creating assets, creating even more money. Mark said, capital creates opportunities that income alone never provides. Mark described businesses that quietly earned money every single month. Jake listened closely while Mark listed ordinary, local investment opportunities. One investment was a laundromat serving customers throughout the week. Another investment involved storage units rented by nearby families. Several small service companies generated income without daily supervision. None of the businesses looked exciting from the outside. Mark never chased flashy cars or overnight wealth promises. Jake noticed the income continued whether owners worked or not. The monthly payments arrived repeatedly from systems already operating. Jake finally understood
Owners build machines that produce income. Mark eventually used part of his capital to start a firm. Years of investing gave him freedom before launching anything new. Because income already arrived, he never rushed important decisions. Slow months came, but Mark stayed patient and kept building. He could take calculated risks without fearing every outcome. Jake watched, quietly, as the pieces finally connected together. The investments were never meant to be the final goal. They were tools that created options and future opportunities. Jake asked if someone starting today could build this life. Mark said, "Success favors people willing to think in decades."
Chapter 5. The Solution Working. Jake opened his investment app before checking online shopping deals. Another paycheck arrived, and he moved money before spending. Months passed, and his account slowly climbed higher each week. He began watching ownership grow instead of tracking purchases. Small dividend payments appeared and quietly returned month after month. Jake paused longer over investments than expensive store displays. Years rolled forward, and the portfolio became harder to ignore. His attention shifted toward assets producing value behind the scenes. Friends discussed purchases, while Jake reviewed growing ownership positions. The numbers changed slowly, but his habits changed much faster. Ethan bought a newer car only days after receiving his raise. Several co-workers upgraded apartments before their first larger paycheck arrived. Vacation photos started filling phones around the office every week. New gadgets appeared across desks, while conversations shifted toward spending. Jake paused longer than usual while browsing expensive items online. More than once, his finger hovered above the purchase button. Then, Mark's advice returned whenever the excitement began fading. Each raise quietly moved into investments instead of lifestyle upgrades. Months passed, and Jake watched ownership grow faster than spending. The hardest part was never investing. It was patiently waiting. By his mid-30s, Jake had built savings large enough to matter. Years of investing quietly created opportunities he once ignored. One local business owner offered investors a small ownership stake. Jake studied the documents carefully before making his decision. Eventually, he purchased a minority share using accumulated investment capital. Weeks later, income arrived from somewhere besides his paycheck. The payment was small, but Jake checked it repeatedly. For the first time, ownership produced money without extra hours. That night, Jake watched the notification appear before bed. While sleeping, his business share earned money for him. Chapter 6. After the Solution. Years later, Jake owned assets that worked around the clock. His investment portfolio kept growing without needing daily attention. One business stake sent income while he focused elsewhere. Another business stake added cash from an entirely different source. Income now arrived from several places instead of one paycheck. Jake reviewed monthly reports while sipping coffee before sunrise. His salary no longer carried the weight of every goal. For the first time, losing a job seemed less frightening. Jake looked at his accounts and saw choices, not limits. He leaned back quietly, realizing work had become optional. Jake met Ethan again after many years had quietly passed. Ethan had earned larger paychecks through most of his career, yet car payments still followed him month after month. The mortgage still demanded attention before anything else. Lifestyle costs had grown alongside nearly every raise received. Jake listened carefully while Ethan described constant financial pressure. Then Jake noticed something he could not ignore anymore. Income alone had never created the freedom Ethan expected. Ownership had quietly changed Jake's entire financial situation. Assets created independence, while high income alone created dependency. Jake finally opened the business he once only imagined. His investments kept working while the new company found customers. Slow weeks arrived, but Jake never rushed desperate decisions. He focused on building systems instead of chasing quick money.
Months passed, and the business steadily gained loyal clients. The company grew because Jake arrived prepared, not lucky. 20 years of investing had quietly funded every opportunity. One Tuesday morning, Jake walked peacefully through a nearby park. Young workers hurried toward offices, while Jake watched them pass. A young man studied Jake carefully, and the circle completed.
The difference started when Jake stopped upgrading every paycheck. Many workers earn more money yet stay stuck financially. Bigger incomes often create bigger expenses instead of freedom. New cars and gadgets quietly consume future investment opportunities. Jake treated every raise like future ownership capital. That simple habit, repeated across years, changed everything. His investments kept growing, while lifestyle costs stayed controlled. Eventually, assets produced income without requiring extra working hours. The gap between earners and owners became impossible to ignore. Ownership rewarded patience, long after spending would have disappeared. Now imagine your next paycheck arrives exactly as expected. Most people already know where every dollar will disappear. Bills take some, spending takes more, and little remains. But one small decision can change that entire pattern. Take a portion before spending and invest it first. The amount matters less than building the habit consistently. A simple index fund can own thousands of businesses. While you work daily, those businesses keep working too. Years later, the results often surprise patient investors. The journey begins with the very next paycheck received.